Hello everybody! How was your February? Mine has been primarily stressful. I had exams and I found a couple of new things out about myself that I now find myself dealing with. But let's not talk about me too much and get straight into it. Today I'll show you my March Bujo setup. For this month's theme, I chose the Hitchcock classic The Birds. I need to confess that my process this month was more freeform than before. I couldn't really focus on an accent colour since the film colour-wise isn't as telling as, let's say, Vertigo. And my cover pages ended up looking very different in composition, and it felt like I had nothing to really work with. So I tried to have different sections of my Bujo inspired by different birds showing up in the film or its promo material. I started out with ravens, or are they crows? I'm not sure. I think the picture of actress Tippi Hedren being attacked by a bunch of them in an old attic is probably one that many people are familiar with, especially since it has also been used in posters and in promotional material. So obviously I chose it as my cover picture. I wasn't necessarily trying to capture the exact scene, but more like the general atmosphere and ambience. I also later added little paper ravens instead of drawing them on because I thought it might look a little bit more 3D. I'm not sure if I succeeded or if I'm happy with how it looked, but you know, you live and you learn, and if you don't try out new things you can never get better at anything. This time I moved the quote back to the beginning, and as with the cover page, I'm again trying to capture a very atmospheric scene from the movie. There is a sequence where ravens, or well, crows, again I'm not sure what they are, begin to flock together on the playground of the local school, building up and up until almost nothing else is visible anymore but black feathers. All while Melanie, Tippi Hedren's character, seems to be too caught up with herself to notice. We, as the viewers, of course, know that a threat is building in the background. We know something awful will soon happen, yet there's simply nothing we can do but watch and see how it plays out. This plays perfectly into Hitchcock's theory of suspense. Mystery is when the spectator knows less than the characters in the movie. Suspense is when the spectator knows more than the character in the movie. And so we do exactly that here. We know the birds are, for whatever reason, violent. We know they are gathering to attack, and we know they are in close proximity to Melanie, who herself is innocently oblivious to what awaits. Suspense is always more of an emotional process, a waiting for a bomb to go off. There is a series of recordings of Hitchcock himself talking about the topic where he uses exactly this as an example: a bomb underneath a table. The audience knows it's there, the characters do not, and while the audience knows that the bomb will go off within 5 minutes, the characters keep talking about such mundane things as baseball. But just as important as creating intensity is creating relief. The bomb will not kill the characters. Just in the right moment one will notice and chuck it out the window. The audience needs these moments of relief, or else they will become frustrated and lose all involvement. And so, Melanie gets to save herself over and over again. Yet, I don't think the ending to the film could be considered a happy one. The main family drives off, out of the little coastal town everything is set in. They flee, hoping they'd be safe somewhere else. But safety is never guaranteed. Neither we nor the characters ever get to know why the birds acted up, or if they will ever stop. I tried to paint my cover page and quote page with gouache this time instead of watercolours. I don't know if I succeeded. I am personally more happy with the quote page, less so with the cover, but I will keep trying. I've had these gouache paints sitting on my shelf for a while now, and I'll never get better at gouache if I never try them out. As with the previous spreads, I chose a quote by the director himself. There is something more important than logic: imagination. I know this quote is more about storytelling than anything else, but I feel like it applies to life as well. I tend to be a very rational and analytical person, so I often overanalyze or tell myself that certain things are and never will be possible, simply out of logical reasons. But I do that way too much, and it's really not a healthy balance. Sometimes that just doesn't... The Birds was one of Hitchcock's later films, dating back to 1963. The film was published during a time in which the infamous Motion Picture Production Code, colloquially known as the Hays Code, was still enacted, yet not as strictly as the decades before. The code was established in the early 30s and only let go in 1967, 4 years after The Birds came out. It didn't change much when it comes to most setups, so I will not comment as much on each spread as I did last month. I followed the first 2 pages up with a calendar and a page for important dates throughout the month. The next pages were reserved for my mood and habit trackers. If you want to hear my thoughts on them, please check out my February and January videos respectively. Since the film is also set in a coastal town, I tried to take some inspiration from driftwood for my frames of everything. I find the Hays Code to be a truly fascinating topic. It was originally installed as a tool to self-censor itself, otherwise harsh penalties from the American government would have hit the film industry. It is meant to keep up American family values, whatever that means, and it restricted a lot of topics that could be portrayed in movies. Generally, everything considered immoral was off limits. Sex, violence, homosexuality, certain acts of crime and profanity, and so on and so forth. It also established very strict roles that the on-screen characters had to fit into. Women had to be demure, being demoted to mere objects and classic love interest roles. If a woman were to deviate from that, she'd usually be changed by the end of the film, or, well, served with punishment. Men were heroes and generally the more active figures, moving the story along. The code also established a very black and white idea of morality. Good guys were good guys and bad guys were bad guys. The next couple of pages were inspired by seagulls, who also feature heavily in the film, given the coastal setting. Since seagulls are white, I decided to draw them on a black background and added some black paper. Both my media journal as well as the following expenses and income spreads were done in a similar manner. Though not enacted anymore, I do feel like a lot of the code's influence can still be felt in modern day Hollywood films. I'm speaking from a totally European perspective here, but a lot of American films still feel very patriotic and, well, buttoned up to a certain degree. While violence seems to be fine, a lot of characters are still more on the black and white side of morality, and sex as well as different sexual orientations or questions of gender still seem to be kind of off limits. Of course, there's more reason to that than, oh well, they had a code from the 30s to the 60s that forbid all of that stuff. But I do still think that that is one of the reasons that contributes to film today, even though it's not active anymore. The bird I chose for my weeklies was the lovebird. Yay! The whole movie starts off with a prank involving 2 lovebirds, and they stay relevant throughout the film. I also really like how cute they look and how colourful they are. The weekly setup is basically the same as last month. A weekly spread including all the days, my rolling weekly for activities that aren't bound to a specific day but still need doing, and my spread for meal planning, including a grocery list as well as some space for recipes I'd like to try. One of the reasons why Hitchcock films are so fascinating to me is how he avoids the Hays Code through creative visual language. For example, in North by Northwest, he alludes to the 2 main characters having intercourse, the explicit showing of which would have gotten him into a lot of trouble with the censors, by fading to black and then showing a train enter a tunnel. The whole movie is not set on one train, but trains feature heavily throughout the film, therefore also the title. The illusion here should be pretty obvious though. I love this creative use of visual language. Censorship to a degree forced creators to be more creative with how they use the medium, and I just love how they circumvented the code, really, and how that made such impeccable use of film as a visual medium, actually. And it kind of shows that also the Hays Code censors may have not really fully understood how film worked by the time they created the code, and they were more just like on a textual idea of storytelling. So we're nearing the last couple of pages for March. I again went with a spread regarding my mental health and one for my physical health, similar to last month. Since my printer was out of commission, was out of ink, and I for the life of me could not find fitting cartridges anywhere, it was a hassle. I went to like 4 different stores. Yeah. I had to order some and wait for them to arrive, so I had to improvise. Normally I'd print out a black and white drawing that I can then colour in. This time I just had to draw my own, but that's alright. As you can see, the bird chosen for this spread was the cockatoo. Though not featured in the film directly, it was featured in some promo material. Plus I just really like cockatoos. They walk around as if they own the place, which I think the word cocky even comes from their name, and sometimes I feel like we could all just use that energy in our lives a bit. I also again added a steps challenge. Sadly, last month I wasn't really able to fulfill my challenge daily. I hurt my ankles, so I had a couple of days where walking was pretty much off limits. So 5,000 steps a day it is, again. I also went with self-care bingo again. Last month I got 2 bingos in, so now we're trying to up the ante a little. The different categories within the bingo fields could literally be anything you want it to be. Just think of things that are challenging to you, but will also benefit your health. Talking about Hitchcock, we should also always talk about his relationships with the women he worked with, and about how he portrayed women in his films. Warning, this may get a little uncomfortable. The Hitchcock blonde has become kind of a well-known film trope throughout the years. Often Hitchcock heroines have a couple of things in common. They're blonde, they're usually icy and remote in character, they often struggle with some sort of mental affliction or engage in shady behaviour. Melanie basically stalks a man to pull a prank on him. Marnie in the film of the same name is a thief, and so is the female protagonist of Psycho. And they are usually all served with punishment for their acts, even if all is seemingly well in the end. They're often caught somewhere between tragic and desirable, sexy because they are afflicted. Hitchcock films are also often used to examine Laura Mulvey's theory of the male gaze, which I'm not going to go into in detail here because it would just be way too much. The split between object female and subject male is very obvious in most films of his, and it is also very obvious in how the camera frames most young women that they are to be seen as sexually desirable and sought to be owned and controlled. There's also a second female archetype usually present in Hitchcock films, the overbearing mother. Hitchcock himself has been reported to have had a difficult relationship with his own mother, which seemingly carried over into his work. Mother figures in his films are usually overbearing, if not straight up smothering. There is, for example, Norma Bates, who even in death holds a heavy grip on her son, or Lydia in The Birds, who firstly opposes Melanie very strictly. The separation between desirable blonde and smothering mother, well, not just smothering mother, like Freudian mother even, to me is a great example for how the so-called Madonna whore complex shows in films. Women can only hold 2 positions within the misogynist world on screen. The Madonna, deeply innocent and not at all sexually desirable, we see this within female children, mother figures, etc. Or the whore, sexualized and always a castle to be stormed, somebody to be owned and tamed. Hitchcock also had questionable relationships towards his actors, to say the least. He once said that they should be treated as cattle, and has been known to put actors, especially female ones, into dangerous situations. He did a similar thing here with The Birds. Remember the scene I chose for my cover page? Well, reportedly, Tippi Hedren, the actress portraying Melanie, didn't really know what was going on and was actually truly scared within the film because the birds attacked her without her knowing, because Hitchcock wanted to catch that true emotion that she would feel. And it is kind of icky. You know, they worked together a couple of times, but I think their split, I'm not sure, I'm not certain on it, but I think their split as working partners was also not particularly pretty. because of these sorts of situations. My last 2 pages included a memory gallery. I liked this spread a lot last month. It gave me a chance to sit down and reflect each day, and I quite enjoyed that. I cut the monthly stats page though. I haven't really made proper use of it so far, neither in January nor in February, so I simply decided to let it go. I think the memory gallery gives me good enough chances to look back on the month in a creative yet somber way. I hope you enjoyed watching me set up my Bujo for March 2020. If so, please leave a like or comment or subscribe, or if you want to, feel free to visit me on my other social medias. I hope you all have a great month ahead of you.